Hi, this is Scott Garibay, and today we're going to talk about Dungeons & Dragons, and we're going to talk about Gary Gygax in context to Isaac Asimov. Gary Gygax is the creator of Dungeons & Dragons, I think he is the most difficult man to understand in all of American history. I think we're going to be unpacking what he's done for 2 centuries. A quarter millennium. I think it's going to take 250 years to really understood what Gary Gygax accomplished in his life. And I think however, he is an enigma, but there is a key. Actually, I think there are multiple keys to understanding what Gary Gygax actually accomplished. And I think Isaac Asimov is a key to the puzzle box that is Gary Gygax. So first of all, a lot of people, a lot of D&D commentators will tell you, oh, Gary was a game designer, just like the guy who designed Chutes and Ladders. He made a game. No, that's bunk. Gary Gygax was not a game designer. I can tell you that right now. In my humble opinion, Gary Gygax wore, he was so many things, and one of them was an actor. And I think he wore game designer as his as his whisper silk cloak, right? He was accomplishing things so broad and so astounding, right, that he couldn't do them in plain sight because people would get upset. And trust and believe, I understand, if you speak truth, people are going to get upset. It's hard. It is outrageously difficult today to speak truth. I think you know this, right? You out there, there are topics you know more about than other people. Right? And when you speak truth about them, boy, did the world get upset, right? And so the reality is, in my humble opinion, I think it's so clear Gary was not a game designer, okay? So what was he, right? So, and why did he do things the way he did? Well, I think a lot of times to see the thing, you can't look directly at the thing. You might need to see it from a different vantage, right? I just saw, here's a perfect example, okay? I have a yearly pass to Longwood Gardens. It's a world-class feature in my backyard, right? So I live very close, and I can go to Longwood Gardens whenever I want. It's a world-class botanical garden. And it changes all year long. It's astounding, right? And there is an art installation in Longwood Garden right now. It's called SOS, and it's created by Bruce Monroe, and it's these boxes. It's hard to even explain, but there's these huge boxes of light that are put onto the ground, and they play music, and they simultaneously reflect 16 million different hues of light at different frequencies at different times, based on a computer algorithm, okay? And you could walk through it, right? And the Muggles do. They just walk through it, right? And they're like, oh, this is nice, right? But the reality is, it's in a shape, and that shape can only be seen from 300 feet in the sky, and there's no ladder, right? So the only people who really understand what the shape is are people who have the vantage to see it from 300 feet straight above, and there is nothing there. So the only people who have ever actually seen fully SOS are people who actually visited it and then flew in a helicopter over it, or an airplane. Actually, a helicopter, because if you flew in a plane, you'd be too fast and you would miss it, right? So the reality is, you need a vantage to see. And I think standing on Isaac Asimov's shoulders today, we could see Gary more clearly. So Isaac Asimov's life served no other purpose, in my humble opinion, than to be a platform that we could look at the greater creator, who was far more important than Isaac Asimov, and did something that was fundamentally changed the entire world, right? Isaac Asimov was a fantastic science fiction writer, but that's all he was, right? What Gary Gygax created with Dungeons & Dragons changed humanity itself. It changed our intellectual evolution. It changed our emotional evolution. And we're going to be unpacking it for 250 years, right? Now, I think Isaac Asimov was a powerful, powerful science fiction writer, but that's all he was, right? So his life, the real value of Isaac Asimov's life is to serve as a vantage to look at Gary Gygax. So let's do that, okay? So Isaac Asimov was born in 1920, and then he died in 1992. Gary Gygax was born in 1938, and he died in 2008, 5 years after he walked past me at Gen Con, right, in Wisconsin, right? And so, yeah, it's you know, it's huge. Like, it's the ramifications of it are absolutely massive, right? So all this is actually, I think they had Gen Con in Indiana. I can't remember the city they had Gen Con in 2003. It's bounced around a little bit. All right, somewhere in the Midwest, somewhere in a flyover state, somewhere in some kind of, like, you know what I mean, the heartland, right? So basically, you have all this. So let's look exactly. So these two men, I actually think they're temporal brothers. They have a brotherhood bound in time, right? They were not physical brothers. I'm not sure. Oh, Gary did. I think he had some siblings. I think he had a sister, right? But they were brothers in time, right? They came up at the same period. And the period they came up in it's like no period in history, right? Like, there's so much history that happened so quickly because of the Industrial Revolution. And I think there were other revolutions. There were like social revolutions and cultural revolutions that we really don't even fully understand yet because technology changed the world so quickly, right? So, but they were both there, and they were both witnessing witnessing humanity catapult out of the norms, catapult out of the life without technology, right? You know, we flew in 1903. We were on the moon in 1969. Technology has dramatically changed our lives, and it's been used for glory and horror, right? Like being able to fly. You know, a parent who gets divorced and can fly from New York to California and not lose the ability to see their children, right? That's a beautiful thing. Like, it's terrible that people get divorced, but it's not terrible that a child can see both their parents, right? Our ability, when we went to the moon, that was a beautiful thing, right? But at the same time, we built the nuclear bomb in the last century, right? And we used it twice, right? Like glory and horror bound, right? So what did both of these men hit? They both hit. This is really critical to understand. They hit an aggregate epiphany. Okay, both Isaac Asimov and Gary Gygax had an aggregate epiphany about American politics, American culture, and American religion. I think, and why don't I just say, oh, well, they had, you know, an international, because they didn't, right? Like, and here's the thing. This planet, we're so blessed to have each other, right? But the reality is, there's no country in the world like America, and it creates these greater creators, right? And the reality is, I think the vast majority of the world is decades behind. There's all this nonsense talk right now that America isn't the greatest country in the world. You can check that at the door. Like, we are absolutely the greatest country in the world, still, and we will be for probably another millennia, in my opinion, right? And you know, and so, and a lot of people talk about. I actually do think there is some truth to the fact that America is a proxy for Rome, but I think we're going to be the Rome that succeeds, right? Like, we have a path forward that Rome failed at. Rome had some problems that America doesn't have, right? And they didn't have people who are as dedicated to freedom and liberty, right? They still had a lot of antiquated ideas, and America has left a lot of those behind. And our melting pot is real, right? We've had a black president. We've had white presidents, right? We don't talk the talk. We do the do, right? Like, it's, you know, it's more here. And we are going to surpass Rome, right? So the two of them had an aggregate epiphany about American politics, American culture, and American religion. And they looked at it. And if you look at Foundation, Isaac Asimov's best work, right, he's really talking about empire is America, right? And if you look at Gary, Dungeons and Dragons is American Tolkien. Tolkien slammed the spike into the ground and said, this is fantasy that matters, right? Beowulf, you can forget that nonsense. Shakespeare scrawled a couple lines out, right? Check it out. I'm J.R., I'm Tolkien, right? Like, and, and Tolkien, I'm J.R.R. Tolkien, right? Like, and he did. He created fantasy. He created modern fantasy. Gary came and said, okay, I see your modern fantasy. Let's make that American, baby. Now it really matters, right? And that's what Dungeons & Dragons is American fantasy. And that's why Dungeons & Dragons is growing like crazy, right? Gary is the root, man. Gary is the tree. And the roots are going deep at this point. And you can see Dungeons & Dragons is eating the world, right? And the suits don't even see what's happening, right? What is Dungeons & Dragons? Dungeons & Dragons is Forgotten Realms. Dungeons & Dragons is Forgotten Realms in the MTG. And it sucks up every Magic the Gathering realm. Cute little game, Citadel over there. Oh, we see maybe making your 40K world. It's ours. It's in Dungeons & Dragons. Warhammer 40K is Dungeons & Dragons now. Forgotten Realms connects to, you suckers just sold it to Magic the Gathering. It's Dungeons & Dragons now. Dungeons & Dragons has a multiverse. Your suits didn't even understand that the moment you created, a Warhammer 40K world, you canonically connected it directly to Forgotten Realms, where there are wizards with Gate who will go and take that Space Marine armor and slay dragons with it, right? And that's the thing. Gary's accomplishment, this multiverse is connecting to the IRL, it is connecting to a Naomi Osaka, and it is connecting to a Space Marine, and it is connecting to Doctor Who, and it is connecting to the largest streaming success in the world, Stranger Things. It is connecting to Lord of the Rings. It has eaten the world, and the roots go everywhere. Because what Gary did was unseen, ununderstood, unmanifested until now, until it could be seen from the vantage, until you walked through the center path and you were 300 feet and above in a helicopter. Gary had an aggregate epiphany. It was echoed in Isaac Asimov's Aggregate Epiphany, and it's why their works look the same. The two men are temporal brothers. They were talking about identity. They were talking about freedom. They were talking about liberty, not from the perspective of freedom from a king, but freedom from our own selves, right? We combat our deficiencies, right? We make every social interaction deeper and more robust, and we explore every aspect of ourselves, every aspect of humanity, every aspect of this planet, and Dungeons & Dragons is literally taking us to the stars. Dungeons & Dragons is not Chutes and Ladders. They literally just launched a vehicle into space 2 years ago, right? Like, you have got to pay attention. You have got to open your eyes. There were two men who had aggregate epiphanies. Isaac Asimov was the first, and the one who had the broader, more understood, more manifest aggregate epiphany was Gary Gygax. That dude mic dropped the world, and we're just now seeing it. Open your eyes, see what he did. Anyone who tells you that that Gary Gygax was a game designer is a fool, in my humble opinion. All that's my humble opinion. What do you think? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Let me know in the comments below. Please consider liking and subscribing, and have a wonderful millennium.